Right, chili con carne. The first thing that we need to do is to get some minced beef. And you can see here that I'm going to be using 5% fat mince, which means we're already reducing the amount of fat. If you think of a steak where it has the ring of fat on the outside, that's been trimmed before it's minced. If you're vegetarian, you could use alternatives. Things like corn would be fine, or you could use mixed vegetables and make sure that you use pulses to get protein. I want to draw your attention to this as well, and this little symbol that we'll come back to later in the lesson. So we're going to put the mince in a wok, which is a frying pan that's got bigger sides. And we're going to what we call dry fry it, so we're adding no fat to it. So tip it in. Sometimes there is paper underneath, so remove that. And if you've touched it, wash your hands. And I'm going to break it up first with a wooden spoon. And then we're going to put it on a very low heat for the fat to come out. And we're going to brown it in its own fat. If you're using corn, we do it slightly differently. If you speak to me at the beginning of the lesson, I will advise you. I'm going to use the back rings of the cooker where possible. Can you just lift up one of the glass lids so that you can see to get to the rings, to the hob part? And I'm going to bring over my document camera so that you can see. And we need to find the position on the cooker that matches. Got 4 burners there, so I'm using the back left. I'm going to press the point to the big flame, and then with my other hand I'm going to click the ignition. And you can see big flame makes you jump a bit sometimes. We're going to turn it now to the lowest flame, and if you're using an electric cooker, set it off on about number 2. And then I'm going to come back to that. It's going to take about 5 minutes for some of the fat and juices to be released, and we're browning it in its own juice. So now the vegetables we can be preparing, and you can work alongside your cooker so you can keep an eye on things. What I'm going to do, I'm going to prepare some garlic. I've got a tray of ingredients there. I've got garlic, I'm going to use a clove, red onion to form the base of our chilli, and then vegetables, it's very much up to you. I like peppers in mine. You might choose to put grated carrot in. Some people like to add mushrooms to it, so very much up to you and your taste. So garlic is related to the onion family, and it comes in a smaller bulb, and this is a clove that we've pulled out, so 1 or 2 cloves. And I'm going to top and tail it, so I'm making sure with a vegetable knife on a green board. That's taking the top and bottom off. And then if you cut it down the length using a bridge hold, we can then get our fingers in to remove this papery skin. And get rid of all your mess. I've got a bin under my desk, so we're keeping your chopping board tidy. I also have a damp dishcloth as well. And I'm just going to chop it, called dicing it, little lines one way, and then little lines the other, angling the knife away from your fingers. At home you may have a garlic crush. We do have some in school, but not enough for one each. So I'm bridge holding, lines going one way and then the other. In fact, I'm drawing a grid with my knife. And then that is ready to go in. It will all cook down and add flavour to the chilli base. Now, an onion, I've got a red onion, it can be a white onion. It's got 2 parts. It's got the stalk end that's grown in the ground and the root end. So I'm going to claw grip it and remove the root, sawing movement, just like you would use a tenon saw. And then with the root, I'm just going to take the hairy part off, because that acts like a plug to hold the onion together. So we want to keep some of that intact. Now, flat side to your board, bridge hold, knife going under the bridge like a train, sawing it, cut it in half. And it's much easier now to get the skin off the onion. So peel the first layer of onion with the skin. That's going to go in the bin. And we're going to dice an onion. We've sliced it when we made fajitas, now we're going to dice it. If you look, we can see the lines of onion, the grain lines, and we're going to follow those, but I'm leaving a little margin of about 1/2 centimetre or 5 millimetres at this end to hold it together. And now I'm going to go across. So I'm drawing a grid with my knife, angling the knife slightly away from my fingers so that if it slips, it's the board and not my fingers. And you can see that it's very fine little pieces known as dicing. And when we get to that little margin that I have not cut through, we could just bin that very end little piece that's held it all together. So I'm going to do that again, following the lines of the onion, leaving a little margin, and then going across the other way, drawing a grid with your knife. And then the last little plug goes in the bin. We're going to go back to the mince now. And we can see if I tilt the pan a little bit, it's started to get a little bit of juice just coming out and a little bit of browning. So I'm going to turn up the heat. Now I've chopped the onion and garlic, and I'm going to brown this. Try and break up the meat as you are stirring it. If it's an electric cooker, it would need to be up to number 6. But only turn it up when you're ready to add your vegetables, because it's starting to brown quite quickly now. And to go in with the garlic and the onion, use your chopping board to protect your hands. When you leave your pan, make sure that the handle is sideways across the worktop, so no one knocks it off. Other vegetables that I'm going to pop into mine are peppers. I'm going to use 2 different colours. So I'm going to start off with the yellow one, stand it on the stalk, and I'm going to take what we call the cheeks of the pepper. And this way you don't get any of the seeds involved on your chopping board. And turn it sideways to get the top. You can even go and get the last little bits. And we're going to dice this. The only bit that I'm putting in the bin now is the stalk and the seed. Turn it flat side to your board so it doesn't rock about. And we're going to do like a little finger thickness strips and turn it sideways, and we're dicing. So about centimetre cubes approximately. If you want to add colour to your chilli, you could share. If one person has got a red one, somebody else got yellow, somebody else green, you could share. And we're after trying to include more of our 5 a day in everyday dishes. So I'm going to add that back to the chilli, protecting my hands with the chopping board. Do exactly the same with the red pepper. So taking the sides off. very top part and then any last little bits. I see all sorts where people are trying to take out the stalk, but this I find the easiest way. Flat sides to board, and then just in little strips again, and dicing all the little cubes. And then in goes my red pepper as well. Bring this over so that you can see. And the meat should be just about brown now. If you wanted to use a carrot, we would take the top and bottom off and then grate it. No need to peel it, just wash it if it's a little bit dirty. Add a little bit more fibre to it. You could grate courgette in it. Right, the meat has browned now, so what I'm going to add next is some passata, which is smooth tomato. You could add tomatoes in a can, plum tomatoes or chopped tomatoes, but I quite like passata. So I'm just going to use scissors to open this. Just cut it on the angle there to form a little spout. And I'm popping all this in. And if you aim low down in your pan, it splashes less. Aim for the middle of your pan. If you use corn, you might need to add some water as well, because it acts quite like a sponge, so you could swill out your can or your packet and put a little bit of water as well. Give it a good stir. Gonna add some stock to that, which is a stock cube or a stock pot. So it could be a red oxo, or if you're doing vegetarian, a vegetable cube. Or I quite like these stock pots that look a bit like jelly stock. And I can just pop that in. It dissolves, it doesn't need crumbling, and in that goes. It will dissolve. You'll notice now we're getting bubbles in my pan, and we're after bringing it to the boil, which means it is bubbling. So I usually say look for this in your pan for a boil, and then we're going to turn it to what we call a simmer, which means that we have to turn it to the lowest flame, or number 1 or 2 on an electric cooker. And can you see how the flame has reduced? And instead of it boiling vigorously, we're getting a little bit of gentle movement known as a simmer. And that's where the cooking takes place, just below boiling point. Now to that, to make it a chilli, I'm going to add some chilli powder. But rule number 1, never tip it over your pan, because if the lid comes off, it goes in, you've ruined your food. So I always do it over the worktop. And 1 or 2 teaspoons. If you prefer to bring in a fresh chilli, that's absolutely fine. And the seeds are the most powerful part. Sometimes stir it up a little bit to get the powder loose. I like it quite hot, so I'm going to put 2 teaspoons of chilli powder in. 1, 2. I'm also going to put some black pepper. We're not adding any salt because there's enough salt in the meat. So, back over, I'm going to use black pepper, which is a spice, so it doesn't add any harm to health. It gives lots of good flavour. And we're trying to reduce the salt content of foods and use natural salts that are in the meat, and the stock pot is also quite salty. So So that's gently bubbling, and it wouldn't be a chili without some beans. So I'm going to now add some red kidney beans. I've gone for a large can because it's good to bulk out the chili. They're healthy, it counts as one of your 5 a day, but also it means it's cheaper on your pocket because you get more servings out of it as well. The ring pull, I always start it pointed up to the ceiling, bend it back on itself a little bit. Be careful that you've not got this part of your hand to cut as you rip it back. Hold it lower down, and instead of just ripping back, I go up to the ceiling and then back. And I'm going to drain that now. Could you just pass me a sieve? Just in that one. We don't want the juice going in. There are other beans that you could use. It could be chickpeas, for example, butter beans, mixed beans, black beans, baked beans would even go. You could add the tomato sauce as well to that. So I'm just going to drain these and rinse them in cold water. It has a bit of slimy juice that you don't want in. Just run that under a cold tap. Don't drip this back, causing a slip hazard. Catch it with your chopping board. And then if we go back to the pan, in go our red kidney beans, and then the chili is starting to take shape. And it's just going to simmer gently for about 30 minutes. At home I would cook it for about an hour. The meat would be cooked now, but it gets more tender the longer that you cook it. Tender means easy to eat, nice and easy to bite through. So we want tender meat and vegetables. The flavours will also develop as it's simmering there. And you can just leave your wooden spoon just sort of rested there to give it a stir now and again. At this point, you could get all your washing up done, tidying up, and we'll come back to look at it just before the end of the lesson.